Hello and welcome to today's daily news analysis. So today is 10th of March 2022. We are covering the Hindu newspapers Delhi edition. As part of our initiative, I make it a point to share questions for mains answer writing practice, and the approach is very simple. I'm sharing you the questions so that you know as to how questions can be asked from the newspaper. So your mains based preparation is being done. On an average, I'm trying that I'm sharing only 2 questions. In fact, today I could frame 4-5 questions. But I'm only sharing 2 questions, and you can get these evaluated from me. You write your answers, maintain the register, so your notes are also getting prepared, and you can get these evaluated. All you have to do is take a image from your mobile phone, share it as a PDF, and I'll get back to you. Now, in the process, inevitably you are also preparing for your prelims. So this is a very comprehensive coverage. In 30-35 minutes, everything, most of your current affairs is getting covered. Now coming to the topics, so first of all, I have questions on these 2 topics, very important. Monetization, national monetization pipeline. So this is important. And state election commission was in news. Somewhere we somehow neglect state component. We focus on central election commission, but not the state component. So now there is a recent controversy in Delhi. So I have framed a question on this. So this is very important. Now, this article over here, this is an opinion, and this one are important. A new vision for old age. Let me put it this way, that as we are experiencing demographic dividend, more youthful population, and imagine 20 years from now, this population that we are in, actually the median age is 29 years. So they are reproducing less. So the population will come down at the younger age, but there was a bulge at the median age of 29. So after 20 years, we will have more number of people who are aged. So those who are 29 years old, 20 years from now, they will be 49, 50. So there will be higher burden of the aging population, and therefore we need to address the issue of the old age population. It could be healthcare, it could be financial needs, etc. So here basically it is looking at the old age home. So we will extrapolate this a bit, this concept over here. Right. Again, this headline is a bit misleading, but this is pretty apt for our preparation. So water and society. Right. So this we are going to cover. But yes, I am not sharing this question. I want you to focus more on these 2 topics for the time being. Now let's get started. So first news, this is basically an update of what all is happening with reference to this Ukraine-Russia war. So first of all, there are talks that are going on between Ukraine, Russia, and they are taking place along the border of Belarus and Poland. So here, like in the earlier also, Ukraine said that okay, fine, you have a problem, Russia has a problem with Ukraine joining NATO. Now, Ukraine has also realized that these NATO countries, US, etc., are not going to help them. So they said, we are not very keen on joining the NATO. So this was one of the concerns of Russia, which Ukraine is okay with. The other thing is, this region that you see, the eastern side of Ukraine. So ethnically speaking, they are Russians, ethnic Russians. So now they were also saying that the Ukraine government was engaging in genocide. They don't have a proof, Russians, but they were claiming this. And they were the first ones, they were able to get control over these territories. So they said, fine, we will let go of this territory of Luhansk and Donetsk, right? So we will let go of these territories over here. So break away regions. So these are the 2 major issues which the Russians had with Ukraine, so they are able to agree to this thing over here. And I'll add some more pointers over here. So beyond this, one of the purposes of Russia, as apart from NATO and the eastern part, was to secure the Crimean Peninsula, right? So in 2014, Russia made an invasion via this region, and they acquired Crimea, and then they went back also. So they went back also, but they had a control over Crimea. Now you imagine if Ukrainian government is controlling this territory over here, so their access to Crimea can be hindered. Sometime back, the Ukrainian government decided to stop the flow of river river canals that is coming into Crimea. So water supply was an issue. So immediately when they invaded, they started with this water supply. Now I would say that what the Russian government wants is that they would like to cut off this region altogether from Ukraine so that they can secure their access to the Black Sea, the Crimean Peninsula and the Sea of Azov. Right, so that could be one of the agendas, and let's see how the negotiation goes. But somewhere it reflects that there is a progress that is going on with reference to talks. And we also had a news that the EU has decided to enhance the sanctions on Russia. So let's see what happens. And yes, Prime Minister Modi is talking to the Hungarian Prime Minister for evacuation as it comes near end, right? So India has been engaging with the neighboring countries of Ukraine. Here is Hungary over here. So to conclude the Operation Ganga. Operation Ganga was to bring back or evacuate the Indians in Ukraine. Now comes the question, and so this is first let's cover the news over here. So cabinet nod for new firm to monetize land assets. So first of all, new firm. What is this new firm? So that means a new firm will be there which will monetize land assets. So basically the government has a lot of land, be it with public sector companies or just they are owning some land. So this land can be monetized. I'll explain this. Land will be monetized, and for this there will be a company known as National Land Monetization Corporation. Right? So this company will be created, and for this capital will be given about rupees 5,000 crores will be provided, and paid up capital of rupees 150 crores, which you don't have to memorize. Now all of this is part of national monetization pipeline. Okay, so this is my question over here, that is with reference to the national monetization pipeline over here. Okay, so let's explain. This is a part of national monetized pipeline. So let's do this, and this is the question. The idea of creating structured public-private partnerships via the national monetization pipeline to unlock value from underutilized public assets makes eminent sense. I'll explain all of this. Several underlying issues also exist. Comment. Right. So the government has several assets like land over here. So let me just make this a square. Imagine these are the assets of the government. So this can be land, so public sector land assets. It can be public sector companies, right? So it could be this thing. It could be rail, roadways, highways, right? So everything, the assets of the government, which is under the control of government over here or owned by the government. Now it is believed that many of these assets are not being utilized. Full potential of these assets is not being realized. So what does the government do is, this is the government. So government is controlling these assets. So the government says, okay, fine. What we do is, we will hand this over to the private sector. And why will they hand it over to the private sector? Private sector will provide them money. And what we call money as capital. So capital flows from the private sector, which the government wants. They want more participation of the private sector into the economy. So long-term capital, private capital will come in the hands of the government. So it is coming to the government over here, right? And in the process, the control over assets will go to the private sector. And why will the private sector pay money? Naturally, private sector will pay money because it has some potential to earn profits. I'll give you one example. There is a concept known as toll operate transfer. So existing highways which the government had made, so what they are doing is that they will hand this over, the highways, to the private sector, including Dubai based companies, UAE, etc. So they will get control over this. And then they will build toll over it. So they paid the capital to the government, and the private sector is now having toll. So anybody who's using it will have to pay a toll over here. So toll operate transfer. But what is toll operate transfer? Monetization of the national assets. Clear? National monetization pipeline. So there are very many other assets, so that will be monetized for obviously private sector profit, and the government gets capital, right? So the government estimated that between 22 to 2025, the government will be able to raise 6 lakh crores. So 6 lakh crores will be raised. What is this? Capital. And what will they do with this capital? It's up to them what they want to do. So one thing could be that it could lead to creation of assets, which hardly ever happens. But theoretically speaking, yes. But we know that the government has a very high fiscal deficit, 6.9%, and they want to bridge this. So it will go to bridging of the fiscal deficit. So it can go for this purpose, right? Fiscal deficit does not lead to creation of assets. It is actually revenue expend. So no long-term capital formation takes place. And we want capital formation to take place if we want sustainable economic growth. We want the capacity of the economy to generate more income, more value, that is GDP, to increase, right? So this thing, asset formation, fiscal deficit, government having more money for investing in social capital, social infrastructure, healthcare, education, etc. We are one of the, or defense also. So for all that purposes, the government has paisa, lot of capital, right? So this will help over here. At the same time, it will be leveraging private expertise. Many of these public sector companies are not very profitable. They are not working very well. So it will enthuse the spirit of profit, competition, and managerial expertise of the private sector, right? So these are the benefits, perceived benefits of this thing. Now, what are the concerns? Several underlying issues also exist. One thing is very, very clear. It is for profit. It will lead to inflation. These roads, highways, etc., all your assets will be ultimately the private sector is getting for profit. There is an underlying concern that all these assets that are being created are created for what? For public good, for social good. But these public goods, if you want to use them, you have to pay money, you have to pay toll. In some way or the other, the private sector is going to collect this money from you only, right? So it is going to collect it from the public. So it's amounting to profit. It is undermining the goal of the social good, right? So social good, that aspect will be compromised as a result of this. And one more thing is that we are entering into a vicious cycle where the government controls these. All these assets were created by public money. It was created by taxpayers' money. And these assets are being given over to the private sector. They are being monetized again. So the public has to pay for the assets twice. So there is a moral concern over here, right? Moral concern, and the government public is paying more. It will be inflationary at the same time. And also one more thing over here, that it is not necessary that the private expertise, we believe that managerial expertise and all those things will lead to better performance. It is not necessarily true. We have various public sector banks, etc., which showcase that they are performing better than the private sector. So maybe it is if we have to really reform, it is about reforming the governance structure and removing the role of the government from the functioning of the private sector. Right, so these are basic things that needs to be mentioned in your answer. And your national monetization pipeline is covered. Now coming to the next question, and this is from the state news. So this is after centre's letter, State Election Commission defers notice of civic poll dates. Okay. So I'll come to the controversy over here, and you can think about it. Centre writes a letter to the State Election Commission, and the State Election Commission defers notice of civic poll dates. So elections were to take place in Delhi basically, and State Election Commission, as we know, are responsible for the elections to the panchayats. So election to the panchayats and the municipalities, and they're coming from the constitution itself, the 73rd and the 74th Amendment Act. Logically speaking, 74th. 73rd was for the creation of the panchayats constitutional status, 74th for this thing. So if the State Election Commission has to do both the things, so it will come from the 74th Constitutional Amendment, which has been added later. Okay, so see, So you know what a state election commission does. It's a constitutional body. It is responsible for elections, free and fair elections. But when the center writes letter, the state election commission defers notice of civic poll dates. And this brings to the light the question of autonomy. The autonomy of the state election commission, and that is what I am concerned with. We are concerned with over here. And you can read this, basically a letter from the state center proposing the unification of the 3 municipal corporations. So just before this, a letter has come that we have these 3 municipal corporations, we want to do this. So for this purpose, the parliament, since Delhi is state but not completely a state, it is also a union territory. So parliament has control over this. Now again, one more concept comes to light. This thing over here, unification of the 3 municipal corporations. Now this is happening before elections, so that again brings the question of neutrality over here. But what I'm saying is that with reference to Delhi, the delimitation exercise is being done by, delimitations means demarking the boundaries of the constituencies. So it could be at the panchayat level, it could be at the level of municipalities, urban level, so parliament. And with reference to the assembly elections, the state constituencies as well as the central constituencies, like in the case of Jammu and Kashmir, it is taking place. So that is done by the Delimitation Commission of India. And for local bodies, it is done at the state level. Delimitation Commission of India has no role in that. This is something that you need to remember. And with reference to this, the Delimitation Commission of India gives a report to the parliament, and they do it with the assembly seats and the parliamentary constituencies. And for local bodies, likewise for the state, gives a report to the state legislative assembly, and they do as required, right? They demarcate the constituencies. Okay, now the main issue over here is the issue of autonomy. So here is the question before you. What are the functions of the State Election Commission? In light of the recent events, do you think the institution of State Election Commission is truly autonomous? Clear? Is it truly autonomous? Discuss. So you have to say the constitutional provisions. You have to, first of all, you start by mentioning about the State Election Commission. You have the article over here. So you tell about them. Then you bring out some issues with reference to autonomy. You give a mention that, see, their main purpose is to conduct free and fair elections at the local bodies. I'm just giving you broad contours of writing the answers. So their responsibility is of conducting free and fair elections, right? Free and fair elections, preparation of electoral rolls, all of this is there. Their underlying duty is this, but there have been recent events, even though they have constitutional status as coming from Article 243, there have been certain recent events where there is a concern of if the State Election Commission is truly autonomous or not. So what are these recent events? So first is, you can see over here only with reference to the State Election Commissioner, right? So the election is postponed due to the letter that has come from the center. Then is the Andhra Pradesh State Election Commissioner. So the removal of the Andhra Pradesh State Election Commissioner, this is the news of 2020. So when they were asserting more autonomy, right? They were asking for their greater autonomy, they were removed. And likewise, an controversy had taken place in 2008 where the State Election Commissioner was removed. So we have three cases. We give a mention of this, and now come to this issue over here. Now you see, you have the article over here, and from here also you can see the issues over here. So first of all comes the issue of appointment. They are appointed by the governor. So if the governor can appoint a person, or when the governor is appointing, that means the state government is giving a recommendation to the governor. And let me put it this way, the state government is being controlled by a particular political party. They may have, hypothetically speaking, they may want to put a person of their preference whom the election commission has to do free and fair election, but they may have a person who may give a verdict in their favor. So this undermines autonomy. So in this light, actually, the 255th Law Commission report had recommended that the government should appoint the governor should appoint the state election commissioner on the basis of a recommendation coming from a collegium, as happens with various other bodies, right? So a collegium should give a recommendation to the governor, and on that basis it should be done. Right, this point is clear, and I'm doing both the things, suggestions also as well as the issues simultaneously. Okay, this was also recommended by the second ARC, right? So second ARC had also recommended. Okay, now comes the service and tenure. Now see, subject to the provisions of any law made by the legislature of a state, the conditions of service and tenure of office of the state election commissioner shall be such as the governor may by rule determine. So the conditions are determined by the governor. They may be changed also. In fact, it happened in reference to the Aparmita versus state of UP. So in reference to this case, it really happened that a state election commissioner, they had a term. Now the state election commissioner can only be removed on the grounds as such of a judge of a high court. That means it has to be voted in the parliament, right? If a state election commissioner has to be removed, the same grounds as of a judge of a high court, that means it is very, very difficult. So 2/3 majority, an investigation taking place, all of this in both houses of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. But there was a case where the governor had reduced the tenure of the state election commissioner, and this was held valid in the Aparmita versus state of UP. Right, so in this case it was done. Now this was not a removal as such, but the tenure was removed. Tenure was reduced to its disadvantage. Now the constitution says that it cannot be varied to the disadvantage after his appointment, but this was done and this was held valid. Right. So the problem is that the governor may rule by determine. And this happens that every state, even though this is a constitutional post, like Central Election Commission, there is a security of tenure. But in this case, security of tenure is not there. And every state is having their own norms because it is coming from the governor or the state legislature. So that is a problem. Okay. The State Election Commission does not have its own secretariat. So it has to depend on the government. So ultimately the governor, right? So the State Election Commission must have its own secretariat so that it can work independently. So this is also undermining the autonomy. In fact, this is also true for Central Election Commission. Right. So the 255th Law Commission had recommended that there shall be a separate electorate for the State Election Commission. So that was actually recommended. And furthermore, we have cases where the State Election Commission has given their verdict, but this is not being abided by the government. And the government can have a kind of a free will because of the governor, the power that the governor has, or the state legislature. So the government is not abiding by this. So in the Kishan Singh Tomar versus, right, so in this case, what the court had said that, see, the government must abide by the rulings of the state election commissioner, right? So they must do it. So these are the basic points that you have to state over here. Okay, so now you have it. You have the functions of the State Election Commission. In fact, that is coming from Article 243 itself. You can quote this. And now, do you think the institution of State Election Commission is truly autonomous? You can establish that yes, some sort of safeguards are provided, but at the same time, there are certain legitimate concerns. Mention those points and then state what recommendations have been provided by the second ARC, the 255th Law Commission report, and the rulings of the Supreme Court or the High Court. Traditions and formality. Leaders' wrangling should not lead to politicization of constitutional norms. Okay, so basically, let's leave this article for the time being. There is something known as Article 176, right? So this article is there, and this article says that when the elections take place to the state legislative assembly, so the first session must be addressed by the governor after the election, first session of the year. So that should be done. And session, right, it is not the first meeting as such. It is basically the series of sittings that take place within the legislature or the parliament. Okay, so this is there. So now what has happened is, with reference to the state of West Bengal, the governor Jagdeep Dhankar, so Honorable Governor said that, see, I'm not going to address. So Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee and the legislators of her party TMC had to virtually plead with the governor that you have to give an address. This is a requirement. So it is a tradition, it is a formality. And what happens in this? So the governor addresses, so I'll explain what's happened with my, So the governor gives an address to the house. And what is this address basically? The governor says that these are the things that the government is going to do. So it tells us about the policy of the government, what all things that they did in the previous year, what all things they are wanting to do in the subsequent years. So the policy statement is given in this session, and ultimately this is put to vote, right? The state legislature will put to vote. If they agree with this, they will pass a resolution to this effect, and it is expected that this will pass. Because this policy that is being said by the governor, it is not by his own onus. He has to say what the government is telling. And the government has a majority in the state legislature. And the same goes with the motion of thanks of the president also, Article 87 of the Constitution. Now, for some reason, if it is not passed in the state legislature, or in the case of parliament in the Lok Sabha, that means that the house does not have a majority. The government does not enjoy the majority of the house. And in that case, immediately the no confidence motion should be introduced. Right? So no confidence motion shall be introduced over here. So what I wanted to say was that it does not lead to removal of the government. No, it is kind of a censure. Now the government has to prove their majority in the house, so no confidence motion. Right, so we have with reference to Mamata Banerjee. Now coming to Telangana, where the chief minister wants, no way, we don't want the governor to address the legislature. So they gave some technical reasons that, see, the earlier session was not prorogued. Prorogued means the end of the session. How can that happen? I don't know. So I read it. Anyways. So that is what they are saying. We should not much concerned with this. Yes, we are concerned that adjournment is the end of the sitting, and proroguing the house means the end of the session. Right? Sitting session. Right. So this is the basic thing over here. Now I'll add one more thing to this. I want to make a video on the governor, institution of governor. In fact, yesterday there was this entire article on governor. So I had added more points to this. I didn't take the yesterday's DNA, but I want to have a holistic video on the office of governor and the associated issues for mains examination. So we'll make a 15-minute video on the same. Water management needs hydrosocial approach. I was expecting more from this article. Basically, hydro and social aspect would be linked, but we don't get that. But what we get is, we get a lot of points over here. So let me first mention what is this hydrosocial approach. Basically, where there is shortage of water, that goes without saying. I keep using this fact that the composite water management index, that 600 million population, 660 million population of us is water stressed, which is precisely 50% of a population water stressed. So one thing is not having water, and not having water means quality of your life gets affected because of this. And you for good life you need water. If you don't get water, you feel sick, you feel morbidity. It may lead to morbidity as well as mortality in the extreme cases. Now, socially speaking, availability of water has something to do with society also. Equity in availability of water. You are well off, you will get water. You can demand water. So, equity in availability of water. If the water is not available, especially in the rural areas, women have to go and fetch water. You must have seen in the visuals, maybe somewhere. Here also see the woman is fetching water. See? It's an unintended, nobody claims in this article, but woman is showing to be taking water. So it affects the woman more adversely as compared to others. It affects the poorer. The water scarcity is more in the urban areas, water scarcity is more in the slum areas. So there is definitely a social impact to this. Not having water, imagine 55% of our population is dependent on agriculture. What will happen to those people? So more droughts, mega droughts, heat stress, income from farm loan issues, right? So there is definitely a social aspect to this. Okay, so this thing. I'll add one more thing to it, that with reference to water management, we are basically focusing on construction of dams, canals, etc. So civil work. We also need to look into the traditional means, the social means of conservation of water and its impact. Right, so that is also an approach that needs to be considered. And what is the impact on the ecology? So we should have, when we are making policies on water management, it should not be full of engineers. It should also have people from other domains, people who are expert in agriculture, who are expert in society, who have awareness of the sociology, ecology, environment. So there should be a comprehensive coverage of these members. And who makes the policy? Particularly the Central Water Commission. And this is not my point. This was the person who was reviewing the working of the Central Water Commission and the issue of water management in the country. Mihirsha committee report. Right. So this is it. Okay. So let's get on with this. So first of all, I'll start writing here only. So there is basically shortage of water. Right, so we have various issues over here, and the primary reason is human-induced transformation of fresh water, and this is affecting the earth and the society. So we have the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So they are saying that the societal vulnerability is also increasing because of water shortage, and it is saying that 40% there will be the demand supply mismatch of 40% by 2030. That is in 8 years it's going to take place, and this is with reference to India. Right, so it is estimated. In fact, when I say 660 million are water stressed, that means more than about half of population are already, there is a mismatch of demand and supply. Okay. Then we have reference of Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 6, which says by 2030, we need to ensure water availability and sanitation for all by 2030. So safe drinking water, sanitation, and focusing on sustainable management of water resources. Then there is UN World Water Development Report. You can say World Water Development Report is coming by which agency? So it is a report of the UN. Okay. So it was released in 2021 and it was titled as Valuing Water. Right, so basically these things are there, and there is basically scarcity of water, and scarcity of water has an impact, has a social perspective also. So when we look at the issue of water, there is water infrastructure, water services, water as input to production, farming, socio-economic development, and socio-cultural values of water. The only thing I want to say is it's not elaborated much. Okay, so we have this. Now, what are we doing about this? So first of all, our focus is on civil works. We are looking at the scheme known as National River Linking Project, right? So interlinking of rivers, we are doing that. Or let me put it this way, what we are doing is we are looking at intra-basin. You know, all rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, etc., they have their own basin. So intra-basin, so within that river itself, river basin, we are supplying water from deficit surplus area to deficit area. So within the same basin. And inter-basin, like Kane Betwa project. So two distinct rivers, so two different basins, so transferring water from one another, intra-basin. Right, so our focus is more towards this. But the issue over here is that we do not know what is the supply surplus is there, right? Is a particular place surplus. Now surplus place would be using more water, agriculture would be there would be more urbanization also in those areas, right? So what we have seen is that it has hardly ever worked. And how do we say that this area surplus, tomorrow this area we make the infrastructure and tomorrow rains do not take place in that area? So there is not good collection at that catchment. So these are certain concerns. And what happens to the ecology of that place? So where there was surplus water, what will happen to the ecology or the species that were dependent on that water? So there are certain issues over here. Now what the article is saying, and which is very good actually, is that our water use efficiency is very poor. One is we have less water, but how do we manage and govern this water? How efficiently we use it? So that efficiency is very poor. So what we see is the average water use efficiency of irrigation projects is only 38% against the average of 50 to 60% in developed countries. See, it can never be 100% efficiency. Right, so that is not possible. Evaporation will also take place from canals. So it is only 38%. At least 50 to 60% should be possible. So efficiency is not there. Likewise, let me put it this way. In agriculture, this article says 90% of the water is being used for agricultural aspect. What I remember was 80%. But we'll go with 90% or 80%, 4 by 5. So water is being used. You must have seen unsustainable farming practices. We are not having climate smart agriculture, so it is leading to water scarcity, groundwater depletion, right? In arid areas we are we are having paddy cultivation like in Punjab, etc. So it is also leading to waste. So what we need to do is improve the efficiency, apart from making the water available. Next, what needs to be done is efficiency in agriculture specifically. You can say, with reference to agriculture, you can refer to the scheme known as Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, more crop per drop, right? Efficient means micro irrigation, that needs to be enhanced. See, I'm going a bit beyond the article over here. Then what about grey water? What is grey water? Sewage water, right? The water that you used, that is grey, it becomes black, it smells. So why can't we treat that water and then reuse it? Other countries is happening. How is water coming in the International Space Station? Same water being urinated or whatever is happening to it biologically, and then it is filtered and again consumed. So grey water, please don't, this is just an example that I gave you. Yeah, so grey water needs to be reused. We need to work on this aspect over here, reuse and recycling of water. In fact, there are countries like Israel, Singapore, which are having much more shortage of water. The population density is much more higher, but they are known for the sustainable use of water. How is that happening? By better efficiency, by harvesting, rainwater harvesting, their collection. Oh, when I say this, how about focusing again on traditional means of water conservation? Right? Not having a one size what is that called, one approach for the entire region. We should have distinct approach for different places. One size fits all approach should be discarded. Traditional methods should be incorporated for water conservation. Best practices should be taken into account, bowlies, etc., rainwater harvesting. Those practices should be incorporated in the arid areas. Okay, so this needs to be done. And furthermore, we need to ensure equity in availability of water. And for this, we have a scheme also. First of all, Ministry of Water Resources. So that was changed into Ministry of Jal Shakti. Then a scheme was introduced known as Jal Jeevan Mission. So by 2024, all households in rural areas will get tapped connection. Right? So those things have to be done. And this should be done not just by the government, but a Kranti should, Jan Kranti should be created. That is revolution of the people. So more participation of the people should be done. Right, so this is all that we can get from the article. In fact, if you want, you can write your answer also on this thing. You can prepare a note. You can briefly state the issues with reference to availability of water. Then you can write a short note on hydrosocial approach, water scarcity, what can be done with reference to it. So water management, water governance. So all points I have discussed over here. A new vision for old age. Okay, I had too many articles today, so I can't. Okay, we are experiencing a demographic dividend. Imagine this is, I'll cover all this bit is only talking about old age homes. So let's imagine this line is representative of 2020. So what demographic dividend? We are in demographic dividend, that is we are having more number of people in the youthful age. One second. More number of population in the youthful age, right? So if this chart depicts youthful population and imagine this is the youthful age, children should have come below this, okay, then elderly population and then this. Now this is the year 2020. So more youthful population between the age group of 15 to 64. Now we know that our median age is 29. It was there in the newspaper itself. Now imagine we are in 2040. The elderly would die naturally, or they'll be very, very old. Okay, so now we are in 2040. Now imagine the same charts, this thing goes up and the reproduction rate, fertility rate is coming down. So we have less number of people eventually. Right, it should stabilize after a point of time. In fact, actually it should come down because our population rate is it may go below the 2.2 level. Okay, so this will happen. So we will have now 20 years from now, this population was 29 years, so 49 and plus. So more aging population, less number of people supporting them. So this is going to be a demographic crisis, right? So this is going to be a demographic crisis in a way. So we are going to have more and more aging population. We have to support them. How do we support them? By means of policy, by means of more budgetary allocation, social welfare. We have very few people, about 1/3 of the population presently is saving for the future needs. You may be saving, maybe you may save much more money, but I'm talking, when we talk about the entire spectrum of the population, that is very, very less because many people are living hand to mouth. Okay, so it will be actually be less than 33%. In fact, most of the people will not be doing, but if we look at a weighted average, we will get this figure. So definitely we need to have a policy that looks into the issue of the people, right? Some proactive measure has to be taken over here. So, and what are the issues that needs to be looked at? One is, are these people investing for pension, financial security, as I mentioned? So financial need, it may lead to impoverishment subsequently. So this is a concern. Okay, with old age, what happens? Lack of social circle, loneliness, sense of isolation, and there is also a sense of disability. Your physical senses decline, right? Eyesight, visible, this thing gets declined. Okay, your ability to, your reflexes, so your motor skills, so all of this come down, and this affects your ability to interact, meet people, move around. So this leads to disability, and all of this eventually also leads to mental health. And talking about mental health, with more aging population, we will have the issue of dementia. And dementia, whatever that is basically the degeneration of the brain. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's are basically diseases broadly coming under the category of dementia. Right? So these are basic issues over here that needs to be looked into. And oh yes, one more thing. Geriatric care, healthcare. Naturally, they will have more healthcare issues also. Less money. So, and less care also, because we are having nuclearization of families. Children are staying away from their families in search of jobs, etc. So we need to invest more into geriatric healthcare, and geriatric healthcare will be different from the conventional healthcare approach of the government. So mental health care, cancer, and those diseases would be looked into, and these are again requiring lot of financial resources. Right. So this is what I wanted to state. I have a question. I'm not presenting it right now, right? I'll do it later, but I have a lot of things for you. Okay. So what this article is saying is that we are having more and more old age homes because of this aging population and people not being there. So old age home, and old age home is not complying with the regulatory compliance. So lack of regulatory oversight is there. So for this we need standard operating procedures. Some sort of standards should be there as to how old age homes are governed and controlled. So they need to be disabled friendly. So people who are having disability, it should be able to. So one is this. Other thing it is saying is that these old age homes, imagine more number of old age obviously elderly people are there. They will have these needs over here. Now this article is specifically talking about the healthcare needs of the elderlies for the disabilities or whatever issues they have. So this should be the formal pathway for health screening, right? So this should be done between such homes and public health facilities. So the infra of old age home where elderly are already there, so we can have the screening and whatever requirements are there with reference to healthcare, that can be met. Now I'll say, why not look into the financial aspects, right? Isolation aspects, so all those things can be focused from here as well. And such intervention will be inexpensive. So for this we need a robust public policy. And when we look at the healthcare, it should not be a piecemeal approach that we are only focusing on diabetes or eyesight or cardiology, etc. It should be a holistic approach. Like all healthcare schemes, National Health Mission, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Atal Bihari, I'm forgetting too many things today. Okay. Ayushman Bharat, not Atal Bihari. Most of the schemes are Atal Innovation Mission, like this. I keep making this mistake. So Ayushman Bharat, right? So we have this Ayushman Bharat, which is looking at holistic coverage of healthcare. So like that for elderly also, they should be there. Right. Now quickly we'll cover the other things. Russia keeps pressure on Ukraine cities, right? They are having a war. They will put pressure on the Ukraine cities. Russian troops make advances in south, right? So they are doing this. And they have said that our aim is not to change the government. So they're also saying this, but they're also invading. They are not halting the war. So we don't know. They also said that we don't want to have a war. It was only a military exercise, and now see what has happened. Okay. European Union tightens sanctions on Russia. Blacklist lawmakers, people associated with specifically with reference to President Putin. So they are blacklisted. Even Belarusian banks are brought into this sanction list, right? The troops from the north have come from Belarus. Poland, which has a grudge actually. If you read about the world wars, Russia and Germany were scheming that how can they divide Poland into two. Warsaw Pact of Russia, again Poland. Okay, so Poland is very enthusiastic and they say that we have MiG-29s, we will give it to Ukraine because Ukraine is not having those F-16 etc. So we will provide. Now US has turned down this offer because see, Poland is a NATO country. NATO country is providing these MiGs to Ukraine. That means the NATO countries are in a way by proxy they are engaging in a war with Russia. So this may further complicate the situation. And this may draw the entire NATO, as per the treaty, if any one country engages in war, if any one country or any country is attacked by Russia, so collectively these countries will look into this issue, right? The doctrine of collective security. Okay, so that is why it has been rejected. Then xenotransplantation, man who received pig's heart. So xenotransplantation, basically human, we have this organ shortage. So we are looking at animals, specifically pig. So it's believed that the pig organs are very similar. In pig, we can actually harvest human organs. So by gene editing, we can harvest human organs like heart, lungs, kidney, etc. So person who received heart, so obviously 2 months back, so this was done. So that operation was successful, but eventually that person has died. Right, but still it was a successful operation in the sense. So maybe this organ thing will enhance, it will improve in the later times. Now I had done this earlier also, the ethicality of xenotransplantation. So this aspect I had covered for ethics. This is done. Give info on Kiev's bio programs. We really don't know much about this, but basically what Russia is saying is when they are entering into Ukraine, they are saying that some biological weapons were being created by Ukraine with the support of USA funding, etc. They haven't substantiated as to what they're saying, but it is kind of like a threat, veiled threat. Nothing really over here right now. So no proof as such. Okay, energy prices are increasing, coal, natural gas, etc. Increasing because of this. Our currency has been depreciated because of this, right? We are basically importing energy. So naturally, this will affect our macroeconomic stability. It will increase fiscal deficit. It will increase inflation, devaluation of rupee. So the growth will get affected, consumption will get affected, which is warned by S&P, which anybody can tell you. Okay, global stocks rebound as markets pause. Oil cooks, oil cools. Let's see what happens, right? So it's already very, very high, so it has to cool down. BSE Sensex climbs 2.3% on value buying, but it is too early to call it as a reversal. If something keeps falling, eventually it will bounce also to some extent. Labor codes to take care of most compliance hassles. We know this. So basically what is there, that we have number of regulatory compliance is very difficult in our country. We have number of laws and rules, particularly with reference to the labor sector. So what the government is doing is they are merging all these laws, rationalizing the old laws and converting them into 4 labor codes. So the idea is to minimize the laws so that regulations, it is easier to comply with. So that is what it is saying. Yeah, this is it. Right then, so this basically concludes our newspaper analysis for today. So thank you for streaming in to IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish.